Hello, I'm Mrs Merton and welcome to the show. When the producers asked me to do this show, I said you can't have an old woman fronting the show, and they said, what about Anne Diamond? And I said, oh yes, point taken. But we have got to have something for the youngsters, so we've got Hookie and the boys. So, enough respect due to you there in the area, so to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're having a party, and my first guest is a lady who's guaranteed to start every party with a bang. Will you welcome Cynthia Payne? Hello, Cynthia. Hello, sit down. Lovely to see you.
I'm sorry I lost one of my best girls, you know, Mrs Merton.
Oh, cheeky. So, I bet you've been planning that, haven't you?
Yeah.
So, Cynthia, you're famous for having...
Infamous, Mrs.
Infamous for having organised parties, aren't you? But while you were downstairs doing the buffet, did you know what was going on upstairs?
Oh yes, we always made sure we sliced the cucumbers.
I bet you did. But we are talking, we're all grown-ups.
Yes, and it is a late show, so
it is. And we're talking about the sex word, aren't we? Sex.
Sex. That's all anybody wants to talk to me about is sex.
Well, what gave you the idea, Cynthia, that it would be popular?
When I was in my late 20s, I soon found out that men wanted sex and girls wanted money. So I thought if you put the two together, you'd have a wonderful party.
But what fascinates me is the luncheon voucher element of the whole thing.
I actually gave luncheon vouchers. They were already 10 or 15 years old anyway. But when I first started, I used to take £25 at the door, and that was for food and drink.
Yes.
And a lady of their own choice, all for £25.
That's a bargain.
And we knocked £5 off road age pensions as well. The trouble is with the young, they think it's all for them.
Yes.
But it isn't. It's the same if you go to a dance hall, they think it's all for them. It's only for the young. Sex is also for the elderly too, believe you me, I've seen it.
Well, it takes the mind off death for a few minutes, doesn't it? You know, sex. It's a normal, everyday...
Have you had much of it?
It's a normal, everyday occurrence, isn't it, for people in London? But what would you say to a lady who, no matter how... She's been married for years, say, and no matter how her husband begs her or pesters her, and he does sometimes, Cynthia, she's never really taken to it at all, because I haven't.
Well, I think when you're young, I think you are sexy and you're romantic. But I think when a woman gets older, she becomes more practical.
But you know what fascinates me? I was reading about the man, the naked man you had hoovering for you. Tell us about that, Barn Pot.
He was my slave.
He was your slave?
He's still alive. He must be, but he was a young one. But I normally don't go in for the young because they're a bloody nuisance.
Did he have an upright?
Pardon?
Did he... An upright hoover?
No, I had the cylinder type of that.
Oh yeah, the cylinder. Yes, cylinder one.
His turn on was just walking about the house naked because he wanted to feel small. And I found it very hard because basically I like men.
Yes.
And so I found it very hard to make a fool out of him. But of course, if he was naked, then to me he looked silly. So I was able to verbally abuse him.
Yes.
But
like,
I found it
do
quite
that bit
easy
on
to
the
do,
stairs and things like that. Where did he keep his attachments?
Well, in the usual place. But usually men like that are a little bit, not abnormal, but...
Balmy.
No! Well, I think the Barbies do all that housework for nothing,
Yes,
they'd be getting £10, £15 an hour.
My husband, he once mowed the lawn for me without his shirt on, but that wasn't erotic, do you know what I mean? What about Ada? Would you like a naked man doing for you?
I wouldn't.
No. Good. You've never married, have you, Cynthia? Did you not want to get tied down to one man?
Well, I've never... I'd rather tie him down. No, I've never really met a man worthy of me, to be honest.
No.
Not really, because I'm still a soft patch in spite of everything.
Bernard, any thoughts there?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I better keep them to myself.
I haven't seen him for years anyway.
So, at this point, Cynthia, I'm going to throw you open to the general public for a few questions. What about Edna? What would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask her what was her kinkiest request.
I've actually got a photograph in my handbag.
You've got a photograph?
Yeah, but you wouldn't recognise it.
No,
I would.
You should have a good go at recognising.
He was a bank manager that used to like to be tied up naked against the wall. It was the listening bank, by the way. And all he wanted was a lot of mud thrown all over him.
Yes.
Nothing but mud.
So, and he was lying there with the mud? The Hoover bag?
Standing up against a white wall.
Oh, what?
Tied up.
Tied up.
And that's all he wanted. And he was naked, but he wanted all this mud thrown around. That was the kinkiest. I never ever had another one, ever had one like that. And the only reason I did it was because I was fascinated to know what was going to happen.
And you wanted an overdraft?
Yeah.
Any other little questions for Cynthia? What about that boy up there with the long hair? What would you like to ask her?
Do you do a discount for students?
Do you do a discount for students?
No man under... We were in our early 30s then. We didn't have any man under 45. Because if you got a young man in, he couldn't handle it and he would get drunk. Because the drink was free.
Yes.
And they would get drunk and they would ruin the party. So I always said no man under 35 would get in. And they all had to wear suits.
Yes, well, at the beginning.
Well,
Ladies and gentlemen, will you thank Cynthia Payne? It's not very often you see a woman knocking back booze on TV like there's no tomorrow, but whenever you do, it's always my next guest, Britain's most notorious drinker. Will you welcome Jilly Goulden? Lovely to have you on, But it's very unusual, Jilly, to see you without a glass in your hand, isn't it? How did you become an expert on wine?
Well, I don't really actually think that I am an expert, to be truthful. I was a journalist and I was always one step ahead of the person buying wine to have with their spaghetti bolognese on their knee, I suppose. And then you just have to walk a bit faster to remain one step ahead, and that's all I've done, really.
So you give very, very flowery descriptions about all these various drinks. Do you make them up?
Well, of course, they spring into my mind. They're inspired. I mean, I suppose I could have a go with the water. Is this Manchester water?
Oh, yes, finest.
No, it isn't. It's out of a bottle, you know. If it was out of the tap, I'd be able to give you some descriptions, because when I sniff it, it just activates some sort of recollection of something you smelt, and it would probably be the municipal swimming baths or something, I should think, if it was the tap water.
And have you ever used this speciality nose that you've got to assist the police or anything?
They usually use creatures with 4 legs for that, actually.
Yes.
And I don't know the smell of most of the things they're looking for, drugs and things that foreign to me.
You wouldn't be able to smell those.
Wouldn't be able to smell those at all.
But tell me, a friend of mine, I once gave my friend Lily a drink, and I remember how she described it. I'll never forget. She said it had a golden hue, full-bodied with a tangy aftertaste, and it turned out that I'd given her one of my husband's hospital samples. By mistake, you know, because he'd gone through a spate of bladder infections in the early 70s. But, you know, she was on a third and quite merry.
And she enjoyed it. Yes, well, yes.
Has that happened to you?
Well, I think that my kicks really come from something that is slightly more vinous than a urine sample, usually.
Do you know how I tell the difference between red wine and white wine? I look at the colour. But when you're wine tasting, you know, are you supposed to swallow or spit it out, you know?
Well, Mrs Merton, the fact is, I don't know how many wines you've ever had at one go, but I'm up to about 150, I suppose, and if you were to do more than spit, you'd be well away.
You would be.
Like horizontal.
Cynthia, do you swallow or spit?
No, I don't. I just like my glass of wine with my evening meal, and that's about the lot.
But any hangover tips for Hookie and the boys?
Oh, I think I got some hangover tips for you. The thing is, you've got to drink a lot of water.
What if you can't see the water? If you
Well, I've never got into that condition, I must honestly admit.
Have you ever drank an entire bottle of gin and then cried your eyes out for no apparent reason?
It's a rather interesting notion, that.
Yes.
But I haven't... Do you know, I don't think I've ever had more than 2 gins at any one time, because although I enjoy drinking a lot, I don't actually mainline it. I don't find that's terribly amusing.
No. It's at this point, Gilly, I'm going to throw you open to the public. We did it with Cynthia and she went down marvellously. Kath, what would you like to say?
How do you stay so slim with all the wine you drink?
Oh,
Well,
yes,
I
because you're
don't
very pert. She's pert, isn't she?
Pert. Pert means sort of like a ski jump, doesn't it?
Yes. So how do you stay so slim, do you think, Gilly?
Well, I don't drink a lot of wine, which is the first thing.
No.
But I suppose I'm lucky.
Yes. So there you go, she's lucky. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call time now on Gilly Goulding. So, Roy, you're very quiet tonight, aren't you? What's your favourite tipple?
I like a pint of draft Guinness.
Do you?
Yeah, because it puts lead in my pencil.
I bet it does. What about you, Hookie? What's your favourite drink?
Vodka.
Vodka. He's lying. I saw them all swinging from the same cider bottle before. When you look up at the sky at night, have you ever wondered, are we alone? Is the Earth being invaded by aliens from outer space? Here to tell us about his extraterrestrial experiences in the Bolton area, will you welcome UFO expert Arthur Tomlinson? Lovely to have you on, it really is. So, Arthur, UFOs, which is unidentified flying objects, Ada or whoever. Tell us about when you saw one.
Well, it was a long time ago now, 1965.
Yes, 1965.
I went down to the front door to bring the milk in the early morning, 10 to 7 in the morning, October the 23rd.
Yes.
Now, it was an absolutely clear blue sky, broad daylight. There was no mistaking what I saw.
What
I saw was an enormous tube with irregular patches of golden light along the length of it.
Yes.
And I had it in view for 20 minutes, and I have not got a photograph of it.
No.
Neither would you, because I stood there gaping at it in utter amazement for 20 minutes.
That always happens when, when you see a UFO, you never have your camera,
Well,
do
some
you?
people do. Some people do.
And this was in the 60s, of course, when, LSD was very fashionable. I'm surprised I've never seen a UFO. I'm always at the window trying to have a look, and I've never
It's purely
seen...
by accident you come across them, generally. I mean, I didn't go deliberately to see this thing.
But why do you think aliens are interested in a man from Bolton? These UFO.
I don't think they're particularly interested in me.
It's just lucky that you keep seeing them. Tell me, have you ever spoken to an alien, Arthur?
Oh,
No.
I've had conversations with an intelligence channeling through a woman.
So, how did it speak?
Well, it comes with the usual tripe about the end of the world and whatnot.
Yes.
All these people who get this information.
But where were you? Was it a phone conversation? Was it... What?
Well, initially it was, but it went on for 18 months, and I was told all sorts of things.
And you were still hanging on the phone? Oh, I hope it was off-peak. So, this is the woman who is she sort of being used by these...
Well, a lot of these mediums get channeled information.
Yes.
Something takes over their voice boxes.
Their voice boxes? Ada, would you like an alien using your voice box?
I'm just beginning to wonder if there's one in mine now.
I think we're all wondering that.
In fact, I'll tell you, the other thing I saw was even more spectacular.
Tell us.
I'd been playing bridge in South Manchester, and we were returning home in a friend's car. Doreen, in the early hours of the morning, we reached Bessie's of the Barn near Whitefield, and we saw this intense white light hovering over the Manchester-Bury electric line.
What was it?
It was a white ball about the size of a football.
Yes.
It hadn't moved all that time.
No.
But then it started to move. It moved backwards in the Manchester direction about 70 feet, and then it turned off the rails and went over the housetops opposite. We chased after it to come back, see if we could find it.
You and Doreen?
Yeah, and it was stopped. Then it was stopped over a house, waiting for us.
And had you had anything to drink that night?
I'm a teetotaler.
Are you? So you
Yes, I'm a
definitely
vegetarian and a teetotaler.
Are you?
Yes.
Lovely. Has anybody else here had any experiences with outer space? It doesn't have to just be in the Bolton area. Anybody? Roy?
Well, the other day, funnily enough, I saw a couple of Martians get on the metro link. And the guard came up and said, you haven't got a ticket, but he said, don't worry, he said, we're a couple of aliens. And he said, we're on the way to Flash Gordon's Tupperware party in
My friend Lily, she once saw what she thought was, well, it was flashing lights in the sky, but then it turned out she was at Blackpool Illuminations, and it was a combination of the sherry and the dodgems. That's what,
Well, we know all about laser lights and things like that, and it's all part of investigating the UFO phenomenon. We know all the false ones, aircraft lights and everything.
Tell me, what does an alien look like? Because I always imagine aliens as a green Paul Daniels or something like that. Are they like us?
There are apparently, many different types.
And have they got bodies like us?
Yeah, they're all humanoid.
Are they? With all the bodily parts like what we've
No.
got? No. What's different
Some
then?
of them are sexless.
Are they? Oh, they wouldn't have been if they'd gone to one of Cynthia's parties. She could have had a party for them.
Yeah.
Arthur, thank you so much for being on our show. Please do come back if anything more like this happens to you, because you're a big hit with the pensioners, you really are. Ladies and gentlemen, will you thank Arthur Tomlinson? It was fascinating, that, wasn't it? Bernard, were you fascinated by that?
Oh, yes. I wonder whether he believes in the Loch Ness Monster.
I don't know. Have you got new dentures, Bernard?
Yes. Yes, I've had them fitted specially for your show. Yeah.
Maybe you could borrow them if you're going out anywhere special. Well, put all thoughts of scary alien beings out of your mind as you welcome my final guest, Dave Lee Travis. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's lovely to have you on. So, of course, it must be nice for you to be back in Manchester DLT.
The homeland.
It's where you started
This
off,
is
isn't
where it all
it?
started, yes.
Tell
absolutely.
us about that.
No.
Oh, God.
I can't remember that far back, actually, Mrs. Merton. It's a long time ago.
But let me take you back now to that fateful day back in '93 when you resigned publicly in front of millions of listeners. Did you know it was going out on air? Did you?
Well, Mrs. Merton is like this. It's a live programme, so I had to know it was going on the air. Yes.
And what happened? Was it panic stations? Did all the big bosses rush in and say, no, stay? Or were they not bothered? Were you a troublemaker or whatever?
No, it was something I did simply because there comes a time in everybody's life when they get that feeling in the stomach that says, I can't stand this anymore. Yes. And I reached that point in my career with radio.
Unfortunately, you were on air when you...
yes, well, I decided to tell the listeners before my bosses that I was going, so that they would know, and they heard it from the horse's mouth, as it were.
Yes.
Sort of.
But do you know what I do? I mean, as you get older, it's harder to find the channels on your radio.
Oh, yes.
And what
yes.
I do, I've cut out a little picture of Gloria Hanifer's head for Radio 2, and I stick that on
Good
there.
idea.
And I used to have a picture of you where Radio 1 is, and now what I've had to do when you were voluntarily sacked or whatever, I've had to Tipp-Ex out the beard, draw glasses, and it's Danny Baker, of course. You know who I like as well as you? You know, old Simon Bates.
Oh, Simon, yes.
And I used to have such a weep at those R-tunes, you know, where he'd
know.
thoughtfully remind you of a tragic incident.
Yes.
And then play a song to bring
Very
it all
moving.
back. Yes. So I always say to people, have a song ready in case your loved one gets run over by a bus or whatever, you know.
That's a very, very good thought, Mrs Merton. I think everybody ought to do this at home.
But you do a lot on your radio show, don't you, for up-and-coming new bands, like the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac and things like that. Is that purposeful?
Very purposeful. It's very possible that if I keep playing Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and Jim Croce and the sort of oddball items that I play now, that perhaps somebody will want to make another record apart from Jim Croce, who's dead, of course.
Oh, well, yeah, so he can't really at the moment.
No.
But, you know, I used to love those fascinating snippets about your farm that you used to talk about on the radio.
Yes.
And some people used to think you just used to make it up to sound interesting, but you actually do have a farm, don't you?
No, I made it up to sound interesting.
Oh.
Basically, we like animals very much, so we have a non-working farm. There's a few acres of land on which we can have some sheep and, you know,
Who's the
ducks
we?
and stuff.
Who's the we? You and...
We, the royal we, me and my Mrs Marianne.
Marianne?
Yes.
And where would she be from?
She would be from Sweden, if anybody'd let her.
My husband's fascinated by anything
Is he?
Swedish. He really is, yes. And of
Does he run a
course...
Volvo then, or what?
Oh, no, but he loved, you know, he loves Ulrika Johnson. She's Swedish.
Well, let's face it, I mean, she's very nice.
Isn't she?
Very.
But you know, she had that affair, didn't she, with the cameraman? She's not seen him now. And whenever you see her on telly, she's always slightly out of focus, isn't she?
You've got to know who your friends are in this business. It's very true. It's very true, yeah.
What sort of things do you and your Swedish wife get up to on the farm? What sort of things do you do?
I don't know why, for some reason, my mind wandered back to Cynthia Payne then. I think that possibly when we are alone, which is most of the time on the farm, we enjoy walking the dogs out there. Well, dragging them, actually, because they're all old.
But let me give you a hypothetical.
Oh, please. Let me do it in a part that won't sting.
It's a typical weekend for you at the Travis home. And you're relaxing with Marianne.
I'm relaxing with Marianne.
Your Swedish wife.
And the dogs.
And the dogs.
Yes.
In the kitchen, and you're...
Yes.
With your pipe, you know.
No, I don't smoke pipe.
Oh, do you not?
No, I gave
Marianne's
it up. Go on.
with the pipe.
Yes.
You're there shaking your fist at the radio, explaining the mistakes, you know, Danny Baker's making on the radio to your Swedish wife, and she's there with a bowl of muesli. She's just had a sauna. You look out of the window, and there's Simon Bates messing about on your combined harvester. And there's little Bruno Brooks in his wellies splashing about in the puddles. And do you ever think to yourself, why me?
Funnily enough, that thought's just come into my head right now. Actually.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you thank DLT?